Hello bearded bee people. Welcome back to the B&K's Bees channel for the first installment of our Getting Started in Beekeeping series. My name is Brett, the bee to the B&K's Bees. We are a honey, nuke, and queen sales business out of West Michigan. And we have such a local interest. There are quite a few people locally that are looking to get into the hobby because they have friends that are into it, or they read about it online, or they saw something about the current stresses to the global bee population and they want to get started. They want to have an impact, a beneficial impact on this problem, and I encourage that. It's a great thing to want to help with, and I hope that these videos will help you while you're getting started and figuring out how to become a beekeeper. So, why should you become a beekeeper? Well, I became a beekeeper because it's fascinating. I was always a nature guy. I loved catching snakes and spiders and following bees and wasps along the riverside when I was a young kid. And then when I became an adult and was searching for a place in life, I found this wonderful hobby. We started off with one hive, and now we have many yards full of hives, and it was life-changing for me. But like I said, I started because of that fascination. There are endless amounts of questions and endless amounts of information that go into bees, whether you're talking about management practices or you're talking about the biology and the science behind what they do. So that fascinated me, and that's why I got involved. Another reason that you might think would be a good reason to start with bees is increased garden productivity. If you have a small backyard garden, if you can get your bees interested in the flowers that your garden is producing, you'll certainly see an increase in production. Sometimes that's difficult. Bees tend to go to larger areas of collected flowers, but a lot of times you can, and a lot of times you'll notice a great increase from years past without bees. Another reason you might think about getting some bees are the obvious benefits, the fruits of the labor, so to speak. The honey, the wax, the propolis, and the pollen. All of those can be sold for profit. All of those can be used in natural remedies. They can be used for sustenance. And if you're into homesteading, trying to be completely sustainable or off the grid, it's a great tool. And a reason that I'm sure a lot of you, that brought a lot of you to this video, is the concern about the global bee population. While you can have some beneficial effect, you can also have a harmful effect if you don't manage your bees properly. So I encourage you to get bees with the intention of helping out with the global bee population, but there will be a few areas in this video and in future videos where we will discuss areas that you can slip up and actually unintentionally harm the regional bee population. But we'll cover that, and we'll make sure that you're well informed so you don't take part in that. Here are some things to consider before getting your bees. Obviously you need some type of space. You can't live in an apartment, although there are urban beekeepers that keep bees on rooftops in New York City and in Chicago. An apartment or a leased place might not be the best option, depending on who you're living around and who owns the property. But definitely consider your surroundings. Neighbors who are allergic or afraid can sometimes cause problems and give you heck. I know of a story where a lady had somebody go to a local city official and complain about the bees that were constantly stinging them, pointing at a set of bee boxes in this lady's backyard. Turns out those bee boxes were empty and the bees were somewhere else, but that just goes to show the fear and the stigma around bees can cause problems with you keeping bees in a tight space with neighbors nearby. So consider that. If you've got that covered, then we can move on. If you live with a large family, or once again, you're surrounded by neighbors, you might want to consider the danger. The only danger truly, other than some drastic accident, is allergy. Allergy to bee venom, to be particular. That chance is very low. You'll hear a lot of people say that they're deathly allergic, when in reality most of them had a bad local reaction at one point in the past, and then they just decided that they were deathly allergic. In truth, anaphylaxis, which is the deathly allergic reaction, happens in between 1% and 3% of people. So the chances of you being deathly allergic are very, very low, but they are not zero, and that's worth some consideration. If you've never been stung by a bee, or if you just want to be completely safe, you want to make sure you have an EpiPen and the protective equipment that we'll talk about in future videos. Another thing you might want to consider, unless money is not a factor, but I'm sure the vast majority of you would not consider money to be trivial. The expense, the cost of the bees and the cost of the equipment. However, that stuff can be lessened. You can build your own equipment. You can seek out used equipment. You can buy equipment in bulk. You can go in with some people in your local bee organization to buy equipment in bulk. But regardless of how you do it, there is some startup cost. If you're not continually growing in hive number, that startup cost is really only that. It's just a startup cost. But in most cases, it's not the cheapest of hobbies. Another thing to consider before you get your bees is your philosophy, your ideology in regards to nature and your impact on that. Now, you can't say, I want to be natural, I want to do everything completely naturally. First of all, these are European honeybees, so everything you do is kind of unnatural already if you're in the United States. But second of all, there are some issues, and primarily I'm talking about the varroa mite. You need to have a plan for mite management before you bring your bees to your house. You can't set them up, wait months or wait throughout the first year and then start to think about that, because you can already be so far behind where you need to be that it can be impossible or very difficult to catch up. And this is where, sorry about that, this is where your impact on the global bee population, or more accurately put, the regional bee population, can be detrimental if you choose to ignore the mites. Now, I don't advocate chemical treatments, at least not for every hive, regardless of mite numbers. I practice a reasonably treatment-free way of doing things, but that means that I am very mindful of mite loads and very mindful of releasing what are called mite bombs. A hive infested with mites that succumbs to that stress leaves a hive, an empty box with some amount of enticing scent and or food to rob. So the nearby colonies come in to rob and clean out that hive, all the while picking up the mites and bringing them back to their own hives. So that is the damage that you can do to your local bee population if you decide to completely ignore it. Now, there are ways to do it without chemical, without miticides, but you have to start off with good bee genetics, and we'll talk about that in a future video. So just be prepared to make that decision before you bring your bees back to your bee yard. First helps to understand how bee sales companies sell bees. The first and most commonly used and most cost-effective method are packages. They're primarily 2 or 3 pounds worth of worker bees and a caged queen in a screened package. You can find 3-pound packages anywhere from $80 to $110. And that's a good way to start off early in the year, earlier than you'd find nukes. Nukes are the second method, and in this way you get to be a little bit closer to the source. You usually go out to the beekeeper's yard to pick your bees up, where you can ask questions and in some cases pick their brain as the year goes on. But yeah, a nuke is what we're looking at right here. It's just a smaller hive. Rather than the 10 frames in one of these boxes, there's 5 in here. They will usually sell you a nuke box full of bees with a laying queen, brood in all stages, plus some food reserves. So this hive would be multiple steps ahead in the bee year from a package that has to start everything brand new. So this is certainly, if you can swing a few extra dollars, and if you can stomach the fact that you get your bees a little bit later in the year, this is the method that I recommend. Another, the most cost-effective way is a swarm catch. The way bees propagate is they build up so much in the early portion of the year that they get cramped in their hive, and they send out around half of their bees plus their old queen, and they go out and set themselves up on a local tree limb somewhere while they look for a space to set up shop. At that time, in a lot of cases, humans will walk by and notice a big bunch of bees and put that on the internet somewhere, and a beekeeper will rush out and catch them. There are a lot of videos on how to catch a swarm. We have a bunch of swarm catch videos on B&K's Bees here on YouTube. And if you can come across something like that, that's the most cost-effective way of getting a bunch of local bees. The last method, one that's become a little bit more popular around here lately, that is getting splits from a friend. If you know a friend who has some healthy bees that are doing really, really well, and you guys have been talking, maybe you could come up with some type of agreement. Maybe you bake them a pie or bring them over a casserole or something, and they'll give you a few frames of bees as well as some brood. As long as you have brood of the right age, and you can find all that information here on B&K's Bees on YouTube, they can make their own queen. So you'll take those frames of bees and brood, set them in your own equipment in your yard, and they will create a queen. And if you start early enough in the year and you feed them and treat them as you should, before long you'll have a nice established hive with a laying queen. So those are the methods that you can acquire bees. That would lead us to where do you get them? If you're going to buy nukes or packages, how do you find that? Well, the internet is obviously where most people go first when they're looking to purchase something, and that will certainly lead you to some areas or some sites that you can get bees. If you're looking to get a package and you don't mind them not being local, and you don't mind not knowing personally the beekeeper who put the bees in the package, then just search 2018 bee ordering, or whatever year is upcoming for you while you're watching this video, and you'll find tons of companies that are willing to send you a package of bees in the mail. That's very, once again, cost effective. It's usually pretty cheap. The mail system is not perfect, but it's usually fairly reliable. But if you're looking to get a nuke and you really, really want it to be some local bees from a beekeeper that you can shake hands with, then I would suggest going to your local or your state beekeeping organization. Here in Michigan, we have the Michigan Beekeeping Association, but we also have here in Newaygo County, we have Fremont area beekeepers. And in both cases, if you were in Michigan or you were in Newaygo County, you could go to either organization, ask a few people, where do I find some nukes, and they'll lead you to a bunch of different sources. So the method of finding nukes that I recommend is certainly finding somebody local through your local or state beekeeping association. If you're far away from your state beekeeping association and you want to find out if there are some local people nearby and you don't have a local organization, then Craigslist or online groups, once again, are probably the way I would recommend giving that a search. Sometimes that can be difficult if there's not a local group that's organizing that kind of stuff. Then it's hit or miss, but it might be worth it if you can't find bees any other way. If you need help, if you've looked and looked and looked and you can't find any bees anywhere, shoot a question or say, "Hey Brett, I'm looking for some bees," and I'll give it my best shot. I know a lot of beekeepers from around the country, and I might be able to lead you in the right direction. How do you get through the learning curve? How do you know what you're supposed to do with your bees and whether you're doing the right things after you've done them? Well, my first answer to that is to find a mentor. There's a lot of information out there. You can read to your heart's content, but sometimes the information can become overwhelming, and making a decision based on something you've never seen personally can become difficult. So a mentor is the most primary resource in that case. You have this guy that you can send a picture to, or this woman that you can send a picture to, or that you can have come out to your bee yard and look through your hive with you. That can suppress all your fears and set your mind at ease and really give you confidence as you go through your first year. So find a mentor. And where would you find that? Once again, your state or local organization is your best chance. If you don't have access to either of those online Facebook groups like Bees and Beaks and our group, Reasonably Treatment-Free Beekeepers, there are a lot of really well-intentioned beekeepers there that will lead you to a lot of good information and help you make the right decisions for your bees. YouTube is a great resource. I've learned YouTube was my main mentor throughout my first few years as a beekeeper. I spent a lot of hours watching experienced beekeepers do hive inspections and swarm catches and talk about queen rearing and talk about fall feeding and spring buildup and all of these things that was initially so overwhelming, but after a while everything just started to fall into place. And I started using their methods to craft my own unique management methods, and so I credit a lot of what I've learned to YouTube. And since you're probably watching this on YouTube.com, I would suggest you lean on YouTube heavily. It is an incredible resource. There are a lot of incredible beekeeping YouTubers out there. I will put a whole list of some people that I really respect and think they deserve a visit from you if you're looking for some great information. I'll put that list in the description. But yeah, lean on YouTube heavily. It's a really, really great place to learn a lot about anything, but especially about beekeeping. So you've read all of the online forums and you've watched all the YouTube videos and you've got yourself a mentor, but you're still looking for more bee information. There are some great books out there and some really, really good websites. I will put a list once again of some good beginning beekeeping books in the description, and I'll talk more about the websites. Two in particular. ScientificBeekeeping.com is Randy Oliver's collection of all of his experiments and all of his scientific-minded beekeeping practices. Everything that he offers on that website deserves a read, it deserves a like, it deserves a share. That website is gold. Another website that's maybe a little less in-depth, maybe a little bit more cursory, but has almost every answer of every question that any beekeeper has ever asked. That website is Honeybee Suite. That is one of the most popular beekeeping websites there are, and that's for good reason. There's a lot of really good information on there. And we have BKBees.com, where I publish blogs and reference material, and all of these videos on B&K's bees from YouTube is on that website as well. So I hope that you consider that a resource. But definitely Scientific Beekeeping and Honeybee Suite, those are 1 and 2 for me. Right, that concludes part 1 of our Getting Started in Beekeeping series. Part 2 will be about the equipment needed to get started, and part 3 will be about getting started with your bees, working your hive, and what to consider throughout your first year as a beekeeper. If this information was too much or overwhelming, or you need some help digesting some of it, leave a question in the comments and I'll be sure to try to help as best I can. But thanks for watching. I usually say get out and have some fun with your bees, but hopefully you'll be getting out and having fun with your bees sometime real soon.